Eggplant.
Hi, welcome to this video, which covers the use of external data sources within Eggplant Functional. There are various reasons to use data files in conjunction with automated functional testing. Perhaps the most common reason is to control the data used by the application under test. For example, when testing the login functionality of an application, testing multiple sets of login credentials is often desirable. It's generally easier to store the test data in separate data files or databases instead of hard-coding the data into the automation script. Data files and databases are also useful when custom reports are needed. The external data sources can be used to create execution or log message summaries or to store test outputs, such as values that were dynamically generated by the application under test. If there's a set of test configurations, such as SUT information or runtime values, data files or databases can provide an ideal method for storing such information. External data sources might also be used to store details of test plans, such as a list of scripts to run as part of a smoke test, and any parameters that should be used by those scripts. External data sources also provide a method for sharing data between separate test executions. This video will discuss Eggplant Functional's support for text, CSV, and Excel files, and ODBC databases. SenseTalk also has support for XML files, which is described in our online documentation. Text and CSV files allow both read and write access. There are a number of commands and keywords, such as the file keyword, that are used when interacting with text and CSV files. When interacting with these file types, the concept of file lines and text items is used. Eggplant Functional is compatible with databases that have ODBC drivers. Database interaction methods can also be applied to Excel files. SenseTalk has built-in commands that allow adding, deleting, and retrieving records, as well as a number of additional functions that are described in the online documentation. Database and Excel records are represented by property lists. SenseTalk also includes the execute SQL function for sending specific SQL queries to an ODBC database. In addition to database interaction with Excel files, Eggplant Functional also has direct Excel control, which allows access to individual cells for the purposes of viewing or setting properties or contents of the cells. Ranges of cells can also be retrieved. When using direct Excel control, cells are treated like lists rather than property lists. When working with data files, the files must be located in a consistent location on the Eggplant machine's file system. Suite resources are an easy way to meet this requirement. The Suite Resources area allows storage of data files inside the suite itself, which means that when sharing a suite, its associated data files always go with it. The Resources interface makes viewing or editing data files quick, and the resource path function provides an easy, consistent method for referencing the data file within a script. Within scripts, files can be referenced by their full file paths, including file extension. If the data file is located within the suite resources, the resource path function can be used to reference the file. Note the use of the file keyword when referencing the data file. Now it's time for a demonstration of the use of external data sources with Eggplant Functional. Here's a basic demonstration of using the resources area of a suite. Right-clicking on the resources area provides a way to add a new resource file into the suite. Adding a resource to the suite creates a new copy of the original file and moves it into the resources folder. So when editing or viewing the resources required, make sure to use the resources right-click menu to open the suite resources copy of the file. Files can have multiple rows or multiple columns, and the structure of the file has implications for how the SenseTalk script is written to handle the file. Databases are not added as suite resources or referenced like text or CSV files. Instead, communication between Eggplant Functional and the database is handled through an ODBC administrator and driver, as shown here. SenseTalk makes referencing files or databases within scripts really easy. Let's start by interacting with a very simple file that contains one piece of information per line. In this case, the file is a text file, though these same principles can be applied to a CSV file. Because the file is saved in the resources area, the resource path function can be used to reference the file. Using the put command combined with the file keyword, prints the contents of the file into the run window, confirming the reference to the file is correct. Note that explicitly opening and closing the file is not necessary in order to read from or write to it, though using the open and close commands is recommended if many rapid reads or writes will be performed against the file. In most cases, the contents of the file will be stored into a variable for later use, as shown here. It's possible to access specific lines of the contents stored in the variable using the line keyword. This example will log the content of the third line in the variable. Iterating through each line of a file while performing a set of actions with the data on that line is a very common procedure. Repeat loops make iterating through each line very easy, as SenseTalk automatically keeps track of which line of the file it's currently on and will stop iterating at the end of the file automatically. The current line can be given a unique name, like food, to make referring to the line within the repeat loop statements very intuitive. This example will log a separate message for each line of the file. If the goal is to type the content of the line into the SUT, the code is very similar, but instead of logging the line contents, use type text. Writing to text in CSV files is simple. Use the put command in file keyword, combined with the after, before, or into keywords to input strings into a file. The after keyword appends, before prepends, and into replaces the content of the file with the new string. Note how Italian seasoning is now on the last line of the file. The delete command is also available for deleting content from files. This next file is a bit more complex. It has multiple lines and multiple pieces of data per line. There is also a header row at the top. Pieces of data are separated by commas, which SenseTalk uses by default to distinguish between pieces of data. We'll refer to these pieces of data as text items. Referencing this file is largely the same as in the previous example, except now that the lines of the files contain text items, it's possible to use SenseTalk to reference individual text items within a certain line using the item keyword. Though these text items look a lot like a list, they are not a true SenseTalk list, so list operations are not relevant when working with these text items. Because this file has a header in the first row, it makes sense to instead begin iterating based on the second line in the file. Line 2 to -1 is a chunk expression that looks at the content in the myResults variable and pulls out all lines from the second line to the last line. Then the repeat loop iterates for each line that was pulled out by the chunk expression. The text items on the line can be accessed separately within the repeat loop. Let's change gears and look at databases. Database references begin with creating a database object. The database object points to an ODBC data source name, or DSN, that has been configured in the ODBC administrator. Note the use of the ODBC type. Once the database object is created, table objects can be created for the table of interest located in the database. Retrieve all records from the table with code like this. Where expressions limit the number of selected records based on column names and the values associated with those columns. Database records are represented as a list of property lists, which differs from the line and text item structure used by text and CSV files. When iterating through a set of records, the repeat with each item syntax will be used because the records are organized as a list of property lists. Within a particular property list, which represents a single record, column values can be accessed using various methods, including the possessive form shown here. SenseTalk also includes the execute SQL function for running SQL statements against the database. Returns from the execute SQL function, if any, can be stored in variables and used later. Excel files can be accessed as if they are databases. Here's an example of creating an object based on a particular worksheet or table within an Excel file. Note the use of the Excel type. The writable property, when set to yes, allows write access to Excel files. Use the records in the where clause to select records of interest from Excel files. Excel records are represented as a list of property lists. The header row of the worksheet is used to determine the column names, which become the keys in the property lists. Access specific columns within a record using the possessive form shown earlier, or the form shown here. Add or delete records from an ODBC or Excel database using the add record and delete record commands. When individual cell access or control is needed, there is a second direct method for Excel interaction available. The workbook and worksheet functions are used to access worksheets within an Excel file. The cell function allows retrieving or setting the properties, including the contents, of a specific cell. The cell range function is available when using the workbook and worksheet functions. It is used to retrieve a range of cells from an Excel file. When using the cell range function, the cells are returned in a third form, which is a list of lists. Each row of the Excel file is represented as a separate list. The items in these lists can be accessed using the item keyword.